I was 7 years old. I hated boarding school and I hated being parted from my parents, and I thought, well, you know, if they go, what the hell am I going to do anyway? So that wasn't a good scene. And then when I got to school, being so tiny and inoffensive, I was really treated like the school dog. So anyone who was out of temper or wanted to be nasty would give me a kick in the backside. I put up with that for a number of years, and then they sent me off to the Woomera Prep, which was at Southport. And there was a guy there who was just bullying me all the time. And I could run faster than him. But one day I just got tired and I got sick of it, so I waited around the corner for him, and as he came around the corner I whacked him. That felt really good. He just sat down on his backside and bawled his head out. So I went to the boxing instructor and said, will you teach me to box? He said, yes, I will. And so I learnt to box and I became pretty good at it. And after that, people left me alone. But I was always a rebel at school, and I was always getting in trouble. I fought with all the masters. In fact, one master was going to cane me one day for something that I hadn't done, and I said, but I haven't done it. And he said, I don't care, I'm going to cane you anyway. I said, okay, I'll bend over. If you hit me, I'm going to flatten you. And he knew I could, so I didn't get a caning, but they made it very hard for me after that. Anyway, my parents got to the stage where they just couldn't handle it anymore. And so we had these friends, Bill and Minette Bell, who owned Camboon Station in the Dawson Valley. They decided that'd be a good place to send me if Bill would take it on. Well, Bill did take it on, and I went to Camboon. And the first morning at Camboon, I came down to the stockyards, and I was R.M. Williams from head to toe. And I was looking through the rails of a mob of about 40 riding horses. And there was one particularly nasty looking horse over in the corner. The boss came up behind me and he said, good morning, Gabriel. He said, have you ever ridden a horse? And I said, no, as a matter of fact, I haven't. And he said, well, see that horse over there? He's never been ridden. You can both start together. There I am as a jackaroo, and there I am. We had got a new stallion who was very highly bred and was in the line of, who was it? Persian Link, I think. And I was elected horse trainer. Really, all that meant was that I got up 2 hours before everyone else in the morning, took the horse out to the racetrack and worked it and brought it back and groomed it and fed it. And then I was ready to go mustering at 5 o'clock with the rest of the boys. Anyway, they decided they'd take the horse over to Billawheeler to a race meeting. And so I went with the horse in the truck, and we got out on the racetrack. The horse won 3 races. First time he'd ever been raced. And so the boss was very grateful, and he fed me 17 Scotch whiskies. And I was about that same age. Needless to say, I passed out, and the next morning I had to ride the horse 50 miles home. And so I had a terrible hangover. There was rain during the night, and there were a large number of creeks between Billawheeler and Camboon. And every time I came out of a creek, the wet soy signal would swing under the horse's belly. The horse would drop its head, and I had a pretty nasty time. Well, this went on all day. Finally, at 8 o'clock at night, they sent out a search party to find me. And anyway, I was in the horse paddock. I was only 10 minutes from home. And from there, I became the overseer on Camboon, and then I became the overseer on Cracker Station. And then I went out to Blackwall, and I spent the shearing strike pressing wool. 50 bales a day, not 50 bales a day, 25 bales, 35 bales a day, which was pretty good pricing anyway. Before that I was paid $10 a bale. So by the end of the year I had about £1,000. So I went to Service Paradise and spent a lot in a week. And then I decided that I didn't want to sit on a horse's back for the rest of my life. And my father was a doctor, and so I came down to Brisbane to do medicine, and I would have been just horrible doctor. It just wouldn't have suited me at all, and it certainly wouldn't have suited the public. Anyway, I was studying for this, and every week I used to go down to the local pub, and I was there one night, and Robin Gibson and John Dalton were there. And we became pretty good mates in the space of 12 or 14 beers, and I invited them home for a drink. And they came because a friend of the family's owned a house out on the top of Hamilton with beautiful views, and there was a little old gardener's hut. And they said, if you want to do the gardener's hut up, you can have it for $10 a week. So I did it up, and I took John and Rob out there, and they came in and they said, well, who did this? And I said, I did. And they said, what? You made all the furniture and everything? And I said, yeah. And they said, what are you going to do with your life? And I said, well, I'm going to be a doctor. And they said, no. You're not going to be a doctor, you're going to be an architect. They said, you can report for work on Monday. And that's how I came to do architecture. Well, Lindsay's pretty well given you a good rundown on the Dobie House, but I had a theory that it's just suspended on 4 posts, and I reckon that was the best way to deal with slip land in those days. And so the rest of it was suspended, and we just had this big platform. And my idea then was to build all the walls on the floor and just stand them up, which was done, because I've never believed in scaffolding, and until workplace health and safety got nasty, I'd never used it. And it was just a very simple little house with a clear story in the middle, bedroom either side, a kitchen and a living dining room in front of it, and then this lovely veranda. It was just fibre, well, I think it was fibre in those days. It was just fibre, and it's gone now. Somebody bought it. I think it might have had some sort of something on it that they weren't allowed to pull it down. And so they just left the poor little thing for about 10 years until it fell apart, and then they bulldozed it, and now there's a very ugly set of units there. And then some other people saw that little house, and they asked me if I'd do one for them, which I did. And that's it. And it was both on the Buderim Road going up to Buderim. And in fact, I think, Lindsay, did you buy that house, or did you?
Yeah, we lived in it for about 3 years.
Yes. So Lindsay bought it and lived in it for about 3 years. And it now has been bought by somebody else. And they painted it cream, of course, so it looks wonderful now. The Schubert House, yeah, what Lindsay said is about right. They came to me, they wanted a Queenslander with big verandas all around it. And I wasn't all that keen to do it because I just felt that you had this big dark inside of it. Anyway, I took it on, and then I started looking at it, and I thought, well, if I can get light from the inside, then it will be worthwhile. And so that's what we did. We ran a clear story window along the top of the wall, and then we brought the roof down, and it came down, it hit the deck for the veranda framing out about a metre from the wall, and we just put clear corrugated system in there, And it made quite a difference for the interior of the house. So there it is there. And then this is Dursley. This is where Lizzie and I first went. And the piece of land belonged to a maniac Irishman. I think there's another Irishman around here. But it's all right because my grandmother's name was Hourigan anyway. And so we bought the land from, his name was Michael O'Flaherty, but he had a nickname of Dooley, and he had Dooley's restaurant down the coast. And after we'd settled on the land, the finance company rang us up and they thanked us. They said, we've been trying to get rid of this bugger for years, and now you come and bought the land, so silly you. Anyway, we started there with a caravan, and the caravan was a doctor down at Mooloolaba called Win Fowles, and he was quite a good drinker. And anyway, I knew about the caravan and he never used it, and so I went and asked him if he'd sell it, and he said, yeah, that's okay, I'll sell it. I said, how much do you want for it? And he said, give me a bottle of rum. So I gave him a bottle of rum and we sat down and drank it, and then I took the caravan away. But Win was a real character. He'd been out on New Year's Eve party and come home completely full. And the next day he had surgery. So he was telling me about this surgery that he had, and he said, Gabriel, I went along there and I looked around the waiting room and I thought, I'm sicker than any of these buggers, so I just sat down on the end of the queue. So that's the interior. We then built we had the caravan, we put a roof over that, and then we built an extension onto that, and then we built a two-storey tank frame, and we had our tank water up there, and we built in underneath that, we made a bathroom and toilet, and a two-storey cubby house or room for Lizzie's son, Harry. And Harry used to climb out the window of his top window of his little unit. He'd get into the tank. He'd take a lot of plastic bags with him, and as the girls went past, he used to bombard them. So life up until then was quite an experience, and it probably got worse. This once again is the Munro house that once again Lindsay has already spoken about. Lindsay did all the detailing through this house, and by that stage I was beginning to find out that he's probably going to be pretty useful in this world. Once again, it was clear story lighting. I just love light in buildings, and I love to be able to see the sky. And then came the quadrupod. A friend of mine became a client, and he asked me if I could design for him a house that could be taken up to New Guinea and carried around by the neighbours, transported. And so we came up with this, which was a series of, there were 4 legs to a pod. And off each leg there were 4 arms, and then we had a screw system down at the bottom of each arm, and we could screw each arm, and we could level the thing right up, and we found out eventually that we could actually pivot the building with it. And that became very successful, and people started liking it. And we came up with this ventilation system where we had a big 1500E, and we just finished it clear of the roof so that we got an airflow up through it, which we thought would probably be a pretty useful thing in New Guinea. And this is where I first started using shade cloth and roll down vines and clear vinyl. And this house was shade cloth all the way around it with blinds that you could just roll up. And where we wanted the window, we just cut a circle and put clear vinyl over it. And the other material we used was cool clad, which was a zinc aluminum with an aluminium facing on the inside of it. And I did quite a few buildings in this manner over time, but it was a lovely little house, and Lizzie and I lived in it. And it cantilevered out over the gully below. And then came the Hastings. There was a real estate agent in Noosa who asked me if I had any ideas of where, well, we're in the middle of the 84 downturn. Anyway, whatever it was, we were in the middle of it and it wasn't too comfortable. So I started just playing with buildings, and I reckoned that we could prefab this thing and take it onto site, and if we got a site we could make a lovely sort of layout of them with courtyards and spaces in between, and just have these lovely two little 3-story simple buildings. So the client eventually came good with the money, and we became the builders for the project. We built one just to make sure we could do it, and then we built all of these. I think there were about 24 of them, and they were just brought onto site on trucks and just lifted into position. I think they were going together about one a day when we got well into it. They're still there. They've all got owners, and you've got to buy the lot to be able to do anything with the site. There have always been people there who just won't sell. And so it's still there, and it's in the middle of Hastings Street with all these big flash buildings around it. And then we just kept going with the quadrupeds, and these people, the Allens, became very dear friends of ours. We built this, all their own tiny little houses. And Lizzie was pretty hard up at that stage of the game. She got the painting contract, which was all very well until I came along at the end of her painting job and said, that's not good enough, it all needs one more coat. So I was very close to being murdered. And this little crew house here was a crazy little guy who found the 105 house. And we used to come out in the mornings and we'd find this little fella crouched in the undergrowth, just looking at the house. And this went on for a while, and we eventually got sick of it and we started throwing sticks at him and things to try and get rid of him. He wouldn't go, and in the end he said, well, you build me a house. And so we built this little thing for him, right on a great big ravine, and just built onto a solid rock face underneath it. And the thing he liked about it, he said, was it's the only house he'd ever owned where the eagle flew underneath him. This was a noble house, once again, on quadrupeds. Dave Noble had a piece of land and he was showing it to a mate of his as they were coming in on a fishing trip, and his mate said, oh, well, some mad bugger named Gabriel Poole who's developed a system that will probably allow you to build on that piece of land. And so we built that one, and then we got Gallaroy in a Pingu saw what we were doing, and he came in and we built a house for him. Sent a team up to build it. That was my brother's house there, and Walker and Towers. Bruce Walker is the guy who wrote the book about me. The Western House in Brisbane. And then this one was Angela Gutner, and this is a beautiful house. Angela came into my office after I built a couple of the ones up at Noosa, and she said, Gabriel, I just love your houses, I love the quadrupeds and I want one. She said, the problem is at the moment I don't have any money. But she said, as soon as I have, I'll be back to see you. And what I didn't know, that was her father owned Lone Pine Koala Sanctuary, which he sold to the Japanese, and then About a week later, she appeared at my door and she said, Gabriel, we've now got some money, let's build a house. And so that was what Angela wanted. And number 7, so it was 2-storey, once again, built in underneath. It was done after Gloucester's house. And we had 2 bedrooms, bathroom, toilet downstairs, and upstairs was pretty well all Angela's area. The one on the right there, number 7, was her studio, and she did these massive paintings, and so we had to get the paintings into the house, and we made this slot window down the back and just put that on a hinge, so we could hinge the window out and then she could push her paintings through there. And for her security system, we just had a bridge that went from right out on the outside back to the garage, and if you got into the garage you could then walk across to the house. This was, I think, what was it, 300 feet or something?
Yeah.
Above the...
100 metres to the
Yeah. Above the ground level. And yeah, well there's the structure. And that was built without any scaffolding. I just love to take workplace health and safety onto that side. But it was a lovely house, and it looked straight out over the coast down to Surfers Paradise and Gold Coast. And Angela always, every house she ever built for herself, she always did something in it. In this particular house, she decided what she'd do is paint the ceiling. And she did. You can see the site. And it had this lovely complexity of roofs which just grew out of, basically out of her brief. This once again is a very beautiful house. Michael was an architect and one of the local councillors. And he asked me if I'd build a house for him. And so we built it together, and he did a lot of work on it, and he was very good. And then when it was finished, he claimed it anyway, so it didn't matter very much. There it is. And he wanted to build in underneath, and that was very, very successful. You can see it was a delightful house. Lizzie and I bought a piece of land down Lake Wyver Drive, and as usual, we didn't have any money. So we designed this house on a very light steel frame and single skin walls. And once again, we used tool clad on the roof, and we just used a double layer of that. And it was all just ply and light steel framing. And we put that together and finished it off in 6 weeks, so it wasn't bad. It was quite inexpensive. And then came the tent house. Lizzie said to me, she wanted a weatherboard house, and I said, no, I won't do a weatherboard house for you. What else will you settle for? And she said, well, what's the cheapest house you can build me? And I said, well, it would have to be a tent, wouldn't it? So she said, okay, build me a tent. Anyway, it wasn't the cheapest house we could have built. But it certainly was a wonderful thing to have and a wonderful thing to live in. And initially we had a really lousy steel fabricator. And he did so much damage that eventually we just had to kick him off the job. And that's when I came in contact with my friend Baz. Baz is a master craftsman, and he and I have now worked together ever since the tent house, and we're still working together. And he came through and he had to fix up all of this guy mucked up, and I think it was
120 hours.
20 hours to do that on a little one-bedroom cottage-type tent. Anyway, there it is. It was to right down. We had a 50-acre lot under a sacred Aboriginal mountain, and the spirits didn't like us being there. And you probably won't believe it, but we certainly believe that at certain times when we were in the living room, this spirit would come through the middle of the house. And it was pretty easy because you couldn't lock anything up. Generally we had all the walls rolled up anyway. And one night there was a most tremendous roar up at the top of the hill above us where the water tank was. And the water tank had exploded, and I was out there completely naked, waving my fist at him, saying, "Leave us alone, you old bastard." So anyway, after that he did. But this little house, we had these roll-down walls, and in high winds we secured them with bolts that just went through in about 4 or 5 places up each side. And Lindsay, as he always does, convinced me that we should send it off to the Venice Biennale. And so it went to the Venice Biennale, and then he convinced me that we must put it in for the awards. Well, I'd stopped putting things in for the awards years and years before this because there'd been a particular instance of a guy who, well, he started architecture with me, he finished like 1 or 2 years after. And he was a little creep. Anyway, he was in charge of the judging panel for a number of houses that I'd done about the time Lindsay came with me. And we put in 4 houses. And he apparently got up and said, "Well, I don't care what else happens." And he said, "There's not going to be any awards for Gabriel Poole." So of course there weren't. And I found out about this, and so I went to the Institute and I said, "Well, I've had you guys." So I cancelled my... I just got out of the Institute and said, "I'll never come back again." But once again, Lindsay talked me around it. And so this then went in for the National Awards. And we had when the jury came with our friend over there, isn't it? Glenn Merker, there was a howling westerly blowing, and the house was just behaving beautifully. It was just rocking around. Well, it's just like a boat. I used to get the engineer's drawings for these and then I'd halve them. And I never lost a house. Anyway, we had a lovely lunch and we saw the whole of the jury back up to their cars, and we came down at the back and we walked into the living room. An almighty gust of wind came and it just blew that wall straight out. I think Glenn's only just found that out. Well, the reason it happened was because we hadn't put the bolts in. But that bedroom there, we just used to sleep with everything up like that. And Lizzie and a friend of hers were sitting on the lawn one night, and the fog started coming up the hill, and they watched it. It came through the room, engulfed me, who was sleeping in there, and it came up the hill, and then it reversed and came back down again. So it was a pretty amazing experience living in that place. And on moonlight nights, you could see the night birds flying over with their shapes on the ceiling. Those little turrets we liked to look of, and we put them up on the corners of the house, and within about 6 weeks they appeared at the Brisbane markets. Anyway, and then there was the Lake Wider house, which was a very beautiful thing. We came up where we'd been in Sydney for a couple of years, and we came back to Queensland, and we thought we'd just live on the site until we designed the house. And so we got a 3-metre square garden shed. We lived in that, and we had a tarpaulin pulled out over the side, and that's where we slept. In winter time, if it got terribly cold, we'd hang blankets around the inside walls of the 3-metre shed. But we still slept outside. And we knew when it was getting really cold because I'd kiss Lizzie good morning, and lips would stick to her cheek. Anyway, we lived there for I think about 12 months while we were building the house. And Baz did all the steel work. Rod Bly did all the structural steel. And the way we did it was Lizzie ran a rope around the site there. And anyone, because she just, well, literally loves the Wallen. And so the rope was the outside line that anyone was allowed to go to. Anyone who went outside that line got into very serious trouble. And there was no machinery allowed on site at all. And so all these big portals, Baz built the first one on the ground and we measured it all up and we both approved it and we said, yeah, that'll do. And so then he built the next one on top of that and the next one on top of that until we had all the portals. And then we got hold of about 6 or 8 men with ropes and they went round and they put all the portals up. And from there we just had planks that we used all around the house to build it. And we put a polycarbonate, twin wall polycarbonate on the ceiling. And then we put this beautiful Ferrari sheet over the top of it as the roof. And Baz said, Jesus, Gabe, you got enough sheet on the top of that roof there to drive a cutter. And I said, oh, well, that'll do. And the thing we didn't know, though, was that we should have tied it down in the middle, because it was so big that when we got the really good cyclones and things, it would go up like that and then it would come down with this almighty whack. Anyway, I found a way of tying it down and it was pretty good from there on. And we wanted to be able to open up the whole of the area along down the front there. Up on top we'd used insect screen and we had just garage doors that pull down over the face of that. In winter time, when we had them down, they'd warm the house. In summertime, we could just put them up and we could get airflow through there all night. But we invented these little doors, which are much the same sort of thing as Julie was talking about. And we made the frames up out of fly screen material and we glazed them all with clear vinyl. We just ran it in with the same as you do with a fly screen. And then we put sinkers on the other ends of them and they came down inside the columns. I don't know what he said, it was just a lovely house and the most wonderful house to live in. Bedroom, bathroom, did it in 3 modules and then we went on to my, probably the best of the multi-unit buildings that I did for a guy from Melbourne. And you can see the position it was in. It was quite a wonderful building and it was in a magnificent position. And then another guy came to me and he worked with Kiwana Waters and they were making these little sites. How big were those sites, Pete? Yeah, it was 250 square metres and the block was, and the house was 130 metres. And it was just an exercise in putting a small house onto a fairly large house onto a small site. And so we just opened it through into courtyards all the way around and the shower recesses on both ends there. We made glass both ends so that they once again looked out into the courtyard and it did give it all a wonderful sense of space. They had a whole lot of land that they were going to do this with and then somebody bought it up, bought the lot and just did horrible little houses on it, so nothing much came of it, but that one was a good one. That's where we started making our first batten screens. We designed all the furniture. Lizzie was heavily involved in this and it was the first job that Tim Benetton worked with me on. We stole the bed. It was such a lovely bed, I thought it should go in there. And this is a friend called Kevin Shire. And Kevin was actually the second client that I ever had. And I picked him up in a pub anyway. But he became a very good friend and he was a nice guy. And this little house is really just a brick veneer, very simple house. And what we did, in the position it was in, it was looking up to the city, but it was on a reasonably sloping site. So we decked it all, and we just made all these courtyards and we ran water through it. And what was a very simple little house turned out to be a lovely, complex little building. Ian Ulrichs was another one, and he had the tuckaroos all over this site, and we weren't allowed to touch any of them, so they virtually dictated the plan of the house. So he was a really enlightened client. He was a great guy to deal with. Simple little house, just weatherboards and fibre cement sheet. And there it is. That was the front out to the beach, and these were the courtyards. And we had a bath just with a pull-up, roll-up garage door once again in front of it, and you could get in and enjoy the bath looking into the courtyard. We designed the dining table, and under that silver cap there, you can lift that off and there's a great big bath underneath it, which you used to fill up with ice and champagne. The bathroom was quite open from above, and then you just had this lovely look down into the courtyard. And these, one of my favourite little jobs. We got these jobs for the Rangers cabins through Queensland, and these were done by we got a transportable homes people to work with us, and this is what we came up with. And they're scattered. Well, these are on Moreton Island. There are 6 of them up on Fraser Island. And there's a story to that too, and that the guys from Fraser Island wanted to go home every night. They weren't happy to live on Fraser Island in these little cabins. And so they get flown backwards and forwards every day. And then this is our little red sheds. Tracy Moffat bought the little house because she didn't care what it was, she just wanted one of my houses, and this isn't a good example. It was built while I was working down in Sydney by the guys who were running the office up at Noosa. Anyway, she said, when she got it, she said, "Oh, it's not big enough, will you pull it down and we'll build a new one?" And we said, "Yeah." And Ruby said, "Well, can we have the house?" And she said, "Sure." So, there it is. And we moved it up to the 5 acres that we've got up at Deerubbin. And once again, we lived in the little shed there while we put all this together properly. We thought it was fantastic. It was out in this great big bare field, and it was pretty frightening, but we thought it was wonderful, and we wondered why people who came to visit us wanted to scratch their heads and said, "What the hell are you doing out here?" But it's now, Lizzie's done a fantastic job on it, and it's got very dense gardens all the way around it now, and it's a very cool little house. It's completely solar driven, and we've also got an in-ground system that we buried 2 metres below the ground, and it goes through 60 metres of tube and then it's pulled up into the house. We find that you get up around 40 degrees, and if we close it up in the morning and turn the fan on, it just keeps the house, well, it keeps it livable all day. because he's got a little plunge pool in there, which we've now heated, and so I can use it too. And that's the interior of it. And once again, we've run this, a big ridge on top of the roof, and we pull the air in from the sides there and ventilate the roof, and that works pretty well too. And then we built these little, I thought I'd look at these as a house that we could flat pack. And so we built the first one in Deerubbin, and I used it as an office for a couple of years. It's a very simple little house. Once again, we built a few of them. None of them like this, because that's what I find happens with anything you design to sell in any sort of quantities. Everyone who wants one wants it to be different. But it was a great little house. And then a friend of ours rang me up and she said, "Look, Gabriel, I want a studio, I've got $50,000, can you do anything for me?" And so this is what we did for her. But we sat down with Baz, we worked out this lovely little frame system, which is just 100 by 50 RHS all the way around. And we put clear polycarbonate in a lot of it to get plenty of light, and just custom wool. It hasn't got any insulation, but she'll take care of it herself if she finds out she can't live in it. She knew that she wasn't going to be able to live in it. And the little building off to the left there is a toilet and shower. But she's a lovely girl, and her son and his girlfriend came up from Canada to stay with her for Christmas. She's only just got it back. And we built a mezzanine into it, and she wanted to be able to clear the floor when she wasn't taking storage out on the mezzanine. And so once again Baz was called in, and he just rigged up this lovely little stair, and there's a little winch that he's got. He just took it on and wind it up, and there it is in the up position. This is the one we're now doing down at South Stratty. The client came to me. She said, "Oh, I just want a little house that I can have down at Stradbroke just for holidays, and I think that little greenhouse of yours was the one I'd like." And so I said, "Okay," and I met her and we started talking. That wasn't what she wanted at all. This is what she wanted. And on South Stratty, at that stage, you were only allowed 10% site cover, which was nothing really. And we got them to jack that up a bit, but then what we also did is we made these alcoves that they're just cupboards on 4 of them around the building. And we let them down, and they just turned into little camping alcoves. So each grandchild's got their own alcove. It's my little sketch of what it was going to be. And that's the alcove. That's what the house is hopefully going to look like. And there's what it's looking like at the moment. And you can see the alcoves along the side of the building there. Pretty pleased with this one. I think it's going to be a lovely house. She's a wonderful client. Here we are picking the canvas colours. And that's the alcove in its present state, being folded down. So you can just push it down. Baz, of course, once again came up with a spring system. He just took the springs off horse floats and put them underneath these, and one person can just push that up and down now. Glenn always said that he used to look at my jobs every year to see what he could steal from me. The breezeway runs through the middle there. And that was supposed to be for table tennis, but Laurie decided she needed it, so it's now going to be made into a big gauze room, and then we just floated sheet awnings over the top of it, and keeping them clear of the wall all the time, so they just floating more or less as leaves. This is a house that we designed for Mornington Peninsula. We've only got it this far. I don't know whether the clients tend to have the money to build it, but that's what we've got. There's the little model. And then this is the little container house. There are all sorts of terrible things being done with granny flats these days, and I don't think any of them are really answering the problem. And Lizzie and I were going to build a house over in Esk, because we thought my legs are going to crack up and I'd just be a damn nuisance at home, whereas if I was over in Esk, she could buy me one of those little trolleys with a flag on it and I could race around. Anyway, but all those things came to pass. From the time we bought the land to the time we wanted to put the plans in for certification, the council had changed the flood levels and we had to go up 1,200 off the ground, which I didn't want to do. And so we'd half built a studio for Lizzie, and we had these 2 containers, and we said, what are we going to do with them? And we decided that, okay, we'd try and do a little granny flat type house with them. And so what we did, we got a container there, and then we've got a 1,500 clear space, and another container, and another container. And to get, as you know, a container is only 2.4 metres wide, which is pretty useless, and for a bedroom. And so we made this little 1,500 wide section that goes into the middle, and that expanded the house for us. But the other thing that it did, we call them the Davy houses, and it brought this. We made that into a clear story, and it now brings the light down into the middle of the house, which I think makes it something quite different from normal container house. And this is what we got them to look like. It's the model and the model. And now I'd just like to thank some of the people who need things. Well, Lindsay, Rick and Peter for inviting me down to this occasion. I was very doubtful about coming initially. I haven't done one of these presentations for something over 12 years, I think, and I wasn't feeling very confident. Lindsay and Kerry both started their careers with me and have been very precious friends for a long time. Lindsay came up, he'd just done 3 years of a quantity surveying course, and he asked me if he'd been in Brisbane, and I think he couldn't get a job in Brisbane because he was over 21 and I had to pay him too much money. And anyway, I said, oh, well, righto, Lindsay, I'll take you on, and I did. And it wasn't a bad mistake. And then later on, Kerry came along, and well, apart from anything else, she was very good looking and blonde. And so I put her on, and I thought she and Lindsay just got on from day one. Kerry said no. She said, no, I didn't like him at all. He was a pest. Anyway, Lindsay obviously got around her. Tim Benetton, who looked after me and has made it possible for me to keep working because I am not registered anymore. Although I think with the number of points I get for this, I might re-register. And so hopefully with Tim I can hopefully keep on practicing until I fall off the edge of the drawing board. all of Tim's office who have also helped to prop me up. And at this stage, Tom in particular he built both those models for me, and he set up the PowerPoint, so he was very useful. My dear and precious friend Baz, who has worked with me for years and will probably work with me until the day I die. And hopefully now we'll get these little containers off the ground, and that'll be something that'll keep me busy for the next few years. With the containers, I've looked at making them, well, I think if you're building a house for people to have in their old age, that you've got to look at the accessibility of it. And with containers, I feel that we can easily put in an overhead gantry, which I think is going to be necessary. We've got them fully accessible. The veranda we made a veranda on the front of the house out of a container, and we put a day bed into that. So we can open it right up or we can close it right down. Anyway, and then there is Lizzie. Love and light of my life, no sleep. My rod and my staff, also no sleep. My very best friend, an artist of great talent, who hasn't really had the recognition that she deserves. And I think it's probably because I sucked off all the pain. My ideal working partner. We fought our way through many projects. We generally come out the other way and have these sort of hairy fights every now and again, but we seem to end up on the same side. Her influence, you can see her influence in much of the work that has been accredited to me. She has been known, when I've shown this work, to get up and say that that was my idea. And I have been known to respond, yes, but I'll get the credit for it. Lizzie got me back on track when I tried to retire. I was driving her mad, and she rang Tim. So she rang Tim and she rang Baz, and yes, she said, look, if you don't get this old guy off my back, I'm going to call this the vet and the green needle. At this stage, I'm surrounded, I feel that I'm very much, I'm sorry that I'm stuttering so much, but I'm not very good at this anymore. I can't find the words. Anyway, doesn't matter very much. Lizzie reckons that people don't notice me at all, that all they see is the hat. And she did that to prove it. And so, at this stage of my life, I feel that I'm very, very spoiled. And I've had a lovely time out of it. It's still going well. I'm still able to practice, and I hope I'll be able to practice until I, as I said, literally fall off the edge of the drawing board. I know I'm getting to the end of my, whatever it might be, and I'm moving into the winter of my life. But at this time, it feels like spring. Thank you.